This morning finds us in Shawano, Wisconsin. It's a town located about 40 miles. Green Bay is about 40 miles that way, which is to the southeast. And we're just south of the Menominee Indian Reservation. And we are here today to visit the grave of who I think is a very intriguing woman who led a very turbulent life. Well, there was a short window of time she lived a very turbulent life, which seemed like a lifetime. Well, her name was Mary Evelyn Frechette, nicknamed Billie after her father. And she was born just to the north of here, maybe 20 miles northwest in Neopet on the Menominee Reservation. We're going back to the turbulent 1930s. We had the Roaring 20s and the continuation right there into the 30s. And she was involved with one of the most infamous gangsters of all time. You've heard of John Dillinger, and Billie Frechette were a pair. And of all the women that he was with, he was in love with a couple of other women. There was one woman before, but these two, they were quite a pair. He wanted to marry her. She was with him at the height of some of his biggest escapades. Not all of them, but we're going to talk about it. So let's walk to her grave. It's a beautiful old cemetery here. The sun is coming up. And I'll tell you her story coupled in with the Dillinger story. I'm not going to focus on John as much as his time with Billie. It was a short time, but quite a lot packed in that short amount of time. But like I said, she was born up in Neopet. Her father was French, and her mother was Menominee. Father died when she was 8 years old. Like most of the children there, Evelyn attended a mission school on the res. These schools were pretty dubious, pretty infamous, how they treated the Indian children, making them into whites. But she attended school there. She would end up in South Dakota at a government boarding school there for Indians, and once she was old enough, she was able to move in with her aunt, and she wanted to become a nurse. It was the year of 1928. In April, she was only 18 years old, and she was pregnant. She had a child. Only 18, no way to support herself, no husband. So the child was put in an orphanage, and these orphanages, and this particular orphanage was absolutely infamous. Children dying, and of course her child within a short time was sent there and mysteriously died. And she was absolutely devastated. But she moved on. She moved on with her life. She was young, resilient. And she would end up going to Chicago, the limelight of Chicago, because her sister lived there, and she wanted to do what her sister did. Her sister was an actress, and of course from the Indian descent, they had beautiful women, dark skin, exotic looking. At the time, people were curious about Indians, and there was a show they would do. Now, Evelyn was not a good actress, so that didn't last too long. So she ended up washing dishes. Well, she met a man running into these, you're in the more poverty area, and she started running with different people, and she met a man named Welton Sparks. And I don't know if she was really in love with him, but her and her girlfriend, these Welton Sparks and this other guy that They were together. This foursome would go out. And then these two guys were caught robbing a mailman. They beat him up pretty good. And the girls, you know, they're behind bars in the jail, the local jail. And the two women thought it would be romantic, you know, these bad guys, to get married. So they married him. The ceremony was done at the jail. But, you know, young girls thinking they were in love, immature. Well, these guys were not freed, thinking, oh, they're going to get out and we're going to be married. They were sent to Leavenworth, gone. So girls are on their own. Reality sets in. So back in Chicago, Evelyn is working at a cabaret, and she's like a hat check girl, and she looks across the room, and who is staring at her but a guy named Jack Harris, this handsome guy with the mustache. It's John Dillinger, under his alias. Now, by the way, his name pronounced by the family is Dillinger, but we're gonna use Dillinger like everybody else. And he's staring at her, and she's like captivated. And she gives him this sexy smile. So he comes over, and he's interested. But how do you break the ice? Well, he knows her girlfriend, so gets introduced. And the next thing you know, these two are a pair. They are going out. He's like, and he did use the line, "Where you been all my life?" Well, little did she know that John Dillinger, at this exact time, had just broken out of the Lima jail. He was already famous, infamous, of robberies, bank robberies. And this Jack Harris, just a month out of jail, escapee. And it was quite the drama there. So there was another guy. He had a gang, of course. It was led by Harry Pierpont. Oh, Harry Pierpont was really a bad guy. Harry, and again, in those days, they would break you out of prison, your gang, they'd break you out of jail. That was just what you did. You couldn't do that today. You don't hear about that. But Harry Pierpont, it was Jesse Sarber was the sheriff, and Harry Pierpont broke Dillinger out in the most brutal fashion. Now, Jesse Sarber and his wife, they liked John Dillinger, and I should say Dillinger was like the Robin Hood. He always had the cool lines. He treated people really well. He took people as hostages. You're like, he was really a good guy. He was a gentleman. I like him. And that's part of his mystique. The other part is his always escaping till the very end. So Jesse Sarber, Pierpont comes in, and they're breaking Dillinger out, and he's got the gun on Sarber, and Sarber's like, I'm not having any part of this. So Pierpont just murders him. He just shoots him. And Dillinger is mortified. He's like, why did you do that? Did you really have to do that? And not only that, Pierpont would not let his wife comfort him as he was dying. He threw her and the jailer in one of the cells to watch from afar her husband just wither away and die. So they got out. We have to get out of town now. They would end up in Florida. Now she's with the gang, the Pierpont and the wives, the girlfriends, and they are all living it up in Florida. And the women are going out in their bathing suits, and they're ordering fancy food. And they're attracting a lot of attention. And things are getting hot. Harry Pierpont, at the same time, is giving Evelyn, and we'll call her Billie, a lot of attention. He's got a little crush on her. And she's kind of liking that. And John Dillinger's noticing. So John Dillinger takes her on a little romantic drive and then pulls over, pulls out his gun, puts it over to her and says, "You've been having fun with Harry. Have you had enough fun?" I'm paraphrasing. And she looks at him and keeps her calm. He goes, "I'm going to kill you now." And she says, "Well, I wouldn't want to live if that's what you thought. I'm ready to die." You know, again, paraphrasing. You talk about calm. And Dillinger's like, "Okay, I guess you're telling the truth." And they drive back like nothing happened. So they get back and they're like, they got to keep on the move. Dillinger says, "I want you to go back to Chicago," or where, no, I think it was Leavenworth. "Get your, go see your husband and get a divorce, because I want you." So he really wants to get rid of her for the time being, because they're going to pull a major heist, big bank robbery. So she goes off and does that. She ends up coming back to Chicago, crashing her car, getting another car, the infamous Hudson Terraplane, which was a cool coupe. She's waiting for him back in Chicago, and little does she know, he's pulling off this major bank heist. In this instance, he came out of the bank, and right out the front door there was a young police officer waiting for him. And of course, these guys were wearing stolen bulletproof vests they would steal from police stations, along with all their other weapons. And this guy opened up on John Dillinger, but he's just shooting into the police vest. And John's like, he never wanted to kill anybody, but he had to shoot this guy, this young guy. So now the heat was on. Of course, they get away because they've got huge armaments, Tommy guns and all kinds of stuff. And their method was, their MO was, they would ride out of the town with at least 6 to 10 hostages in many cases on the running boards of both sides of the car to keep locals and law enforcement from shooting at them as they made their escapes. And then they'd respectfully let these people go down the line. So they get away, and of course they meet up again. Billie has no idea, but she's thrilled to be back with Dillinger. And I got to give you an example. I got to give you one example of, this is a big part of the Dillinger mystique, is his Robin Hood, his suave personality, but he would always escape. Now, there was one incident where he was at a doctor's office, which was a doctor's office for the gangsters, crooked doctor. Billie's out in the car, and she doesn't even notice, but there's like 4 to 5, I think it was 5 police. They got the car surrounded. They're waiting for Dillinger to come out. Luckily, the doctor looks out the window and Dillinger's up there. And he's like, "Hey, there's a lot of cars out there. I wonder what's going on." Dillinger knows exactly what's going on. And he comes out blazing with the Tommy gun, gets in the car. Shots are being fired both ways. But this is Dillinger, cool, calm, collected. He throws it in reverse and pivots 90 degrees backwards down the street and gets away. Impossible. Outruns these guys. And he kept making the police and later the G-men, which we call the FBI agents under Hoover, he would just make them look really bad. Embarrass He would embarrass Hoover. Hoover wanted Dillinger so bad that he made him public enemy #1. So what would happen next? Well, to cool the heels, we're going to go to Tucson. So they go to Tucson and they check into this Congress Hotel. And they're sleeping in there. And the next thing you know, we smell smoke. And there's a big fire. She wakes John up, and they have no time. They have to go down the fire escape. They got to leave the guns, the ammo, everything, the money in the room. And the firemen go in there, and they find all this stuff, and they recognize Dillinger. So he gets arrested. Where does he end up? Well, one of the infamous stories, Crown Point, Indiana. Sheriff Lillian Holly. Sheriff Lillian Holly, the poor thing. She would be humiliated, like many others, by John Dillinger. Well, this is an infamous story that many of you know. This place was being guarded like Fort Knox. They had sandbags and guards. There's a lot of footage, the men marching out front. No one's gonna break Dillinger out. And then they did the big media blitz, photographs and film, where John Dillinger famously puts his elbow on the shoulder and he's snickering. And they're smiling, and she's getting famous. Well, Billie was able to get in there with Louis Paquette, this pudgy, old, crooked attorney who was infamous himself, was able to get in there as Mrs. Dillinger and even get so close as to whisper to him in his ear between the bars. And somewhere after they left, within, well, might have been a week or two, he breaks out of there faking with the famous little wooden black gun and getting, with hostages, getting his way out of there. Now, did Billie, some say Billie got him the gun? Probably not. Was probably an inside job that he got this wooden gun, but he faked the jailer, and then once he got real weapons, he got the warden, who actually did not resist. I think they were in awe of Dillinger. And yeah, okay, John, we'll go along with you. And he marched all these guys, not out the front. He goes through the kitchen, out the back door, no guards, down the street to the garage where Lillian Holly's car is, the fastest, best car in town. And he steals it. And he gets away. Again. So that was one of the biggest, that's probably one of the biggest Dillinger stories. Little Bohemia too, we'll talk about that. And he is gone again, and they're on the run. On the run, and not just on the run, they're just robbing banks left and right. Harry Pierpont would end up getting caught, but Dillinger kept going. They would go to Minneapolis. Why Minneapolis? Well, the Twin Cities was the most crooked place in the country, probably. And I say crooked because it was the police department that was crooked. They would look the other way in payoffs, and all the gangsters could hide out there. Well, they were there hiding as Mr. and Mrs. Hellman in an apartment. Billie had a new hair color. She dyed her hair red as disguise. And they're going out on the town, the old shopping spree, get a new car, and starting to attract attention. And it was a snowy morning of March 31st that there were two G-men that showed up. They weren't sure, but you know, they were checking out all the leads all over the country, and these two particular guys along with a local police detective, showed up at the apartment. One guy went around the back. Now they were there with Homer Van Meter, who was one of the gang members. And they would end up, Homer Van Meter would come back, get confronted, and then they'd get into a shootout. That alerted Dillinger. He came blazing out of the apartment, and they had to make an escape where Dillinger was shot and wounded. I believe it was in the leg. And Billie would drive the car effectively, and they would make their escape again. What would be next? Well, where can we hide out? We got to get away from Minneapolis. We can't hide here. Let's go to the farm, Dad's farm. What's the last place they would look? Indiana, the farm, the Dillinger farm. And they go there and they have a family reunion. There are pictures, many famous pictures of Dillinger sporting a Tommy gun, sporting his suit, and with Billie and his favorite niece. And they had a grand old time, ate well. But dear old Dad had to take Johnny in the woods, and they had to have a father and son talk. You know, Dad was like, where do you want to be buried? Next to the family plot? We have a spot for you, because they both knew their time. This would probably be the last time that father and son would be together. And his father really loved his son. I mean, if you go back to when John first got busted, his father gave him the wrong advice and said, just plead guilty. They'll go easy on you, you're young. And that was a mistake. They sent him away. And that's what made him resentful. And he broke out, and the rest is history. So they left there after the family reunion. And John said, I want to marry you, babe. We need to find a spot. I want to get married. And they decided in Chicago that they would do that. They would go to a tavern to meet up with, I believe, the preacher, or make the arrangements. And Billie went in there first to scout it out with Louis Paquette, the attorney. And it was a setup. It was a setup because the feds were in there. Now John is watching from outside, and to his grief-stricken face, he sees them take Billie and Louis away. And there's nothing he can do. He is absolutely powerless. And did they treat her bad? Boy, they brought her downtown Chicago, and they interrogated her. They wouldn't let her sleep. They wouldn't let her eat other than bread and water, which, by the way, she was fine with. She didn't mind that. But they did torture her. Nothing heavy. I'm sure they slapped her around a little bit, but she would not break. So, trial. Louis Paquette represented her, and Dillinger was going to break her out, and they talked. She and Paquette said, please don't even try, because it would be a suicide mission. Well, the jury took no time. They found her guilty, 2 years in prison, and that was the end of her career, her journey of John Dillinger. She went to prison right away, but John Dillinger kept going. He would rob banks and continue the spree and stay on the run. He's now with Babyface Nelson, Homer Van Meter, Tommy Carroll, John Hamilton, John Red Hamilton, and they had a new guy, a guy who was trying to prove himself, who was running errands, named Pat Riley. And they would go up to Little Bohemia in Manitowish waters. Now, Little Bohemia, I'm very familiar with, because I only live 20 minutes away from there. I go there like at least once a month for dinner. And if you go there today, and they shot the Johnny Depp movie there, yeah, but you can still see the bullet holes in the windows, and they have glass on both sides. Tommy gun, 45 ACP. You can see all the bullet holes in the side of the building, even in the stonework of the chimney. And it used to be, I think it's closed now, the museum where you could go upstairs. Emil Wanatka was smart enough to preserve everything. The lodge owner, after it happened, made a lot of money, and still today people love going there to see, because you can see the rooms. And you know, the story is, I'm not going to go through the whole story, it's a long story, but they were all there. The G-men from Henry August Voss, who was at Birchwood Resort. Everybody knew the Dillinger gang was up there. Babyface Nelson. And it was kind of a novelty, but everyone was scared. But finally they decided to alert the FBI, which they did. Henry August Voss met them in Rhinelander, and anyway, they came up, surrounded the place, Purvis, and it was a big botch. Dogs barking, guys come out, patrons, G-men shoot them. They order them to stop the car. They don't know what's going on, so they shoot the car up, kill one of them, and the gang just simply goes out the back window down to the lake, Little Star Lake there, and there's a hill that goes down to the water, and you just crouch down. And Babyface Nelson went one way because he wasn't listening to the escape plan, wasn't paying attention. Him and Dillinger were not getting along too well. Babyface Nelson did not like Dillinger. Babyface Nelson was a hothead. He was killed in Barrington later. And anyway, they all made their escape and made Hoover look really dumb, Purvis really bad. And then in July 1934, you all know what happened at the Biograph Theater. They finally caught up with Dillinger. Yeah. And then when they told Billie that in prison, they said, well, they got your Dillinger. They got Johnny. She said, well, that's too bad. I think that was her quote. And I'm sure she was heartbroken. Dear old John. Well, she did get out of prison, and she used her fame to do a road show where she would speak. She was like a celebrity. And it went on a 5-year binge until it kind of wore itself out. It was a show called Crime Doesn't Pay, and she'd talk about all her events. And she would eventually return here, well, back to the reservation here in Wisconsin. And she would get married a couple times. I think the last husband's name was Tick. And then she got cancer. And Evelyn Billie Frechette was 61 years old when she died. And her grave is right here. Evelyn Tick. You'd never know it. Just walking by. No flowers. There are flowers for, I believe this is her husband. This is Arthur E. Tick, 1890 to 1990. 100 years old, so that has to be her last husband. Then we have a mother here, 1890 to 1945. And those are the only 3 graves. But isn't it interesting that the flowers here are for Arthur? Or it may be that we have the 3 graves. I think it's probably more the picture of those are the 3 graves and the flowers are for all of them. But Definitely not forgotten. That is for sure. Well, I'll just put this here. For Evelyn Tick. Billie Frechette. Well, yeah, she would talk about John in later life. And the big thing she said, there was something that when she first saw him, she said there was something in those eyes that I will never forget. They were piercing and electric, yet there was an amused, carefree twinkle in them too. They met my eyes and held me hypnotized for an instant. She would say shortly before her death, I've had one hell of a life. Well, I would say, Billie, you certainly did. 6 months with Dillinger, just 6 months, but that 6 months was a lifetime. And no one will forget you. All right, gang. From Shawano, Wisconsin, on this beautiful morning, I will see you guys on the next one. But I thought I'd share a little story about Billie Frechette. I think very intriguing woman. Rest in peace to the family. All right, see you on the next one, guys.